Hi, everyone. This is Marc Bates, and this is the Rabbit Room Apologetics podcast. And let's get into it. So, last time we ended up at the end of day 3, right? So, in day 3, God brought forth the vegetation. Remember, he's not talking about not laying out every single type of plants, it's just plants in general, right? And so he's laying them out, and then he ends that there was evening and there was morning the third day. But there's something still missing, and that's coming up here on day 4. So we're at verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens." And remember, let's go back to the worldview of the Hebrews, right? 4000 BC Hebrews, where you had the earth was a disk below the heavens. You had the heavens, then you had a firmament, there was water above and below, right? This is their worldview. This is the way they saw things because they didn't have satellites, they didn't have telescopes yet. So we're writing to their worldview, okay? And and God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night." Okay, night is not the absence of light. There is still light at night. So when God separated light, darkness and light, right? That's not the same as day and night. Darkness would be the absence of light. There was a very interesting experiment I watched maybe about a year ago. I'm not sure how old it was at that point, but this guy built a room, a dark room, and he painted the walls with what was at that point, and I think it still is, the darkest black that you could find. And there's actually a rating on how black things are. And he painted the walls and the ceiling with this black paint. And he put really good seals on the doors. So when he shut the doors, no light was coming through, right? And so he would shut the door and he turned off the light. And so there was absolutely no light in this room. And it was so dark. It wasn't still technically 100% dark, right? Because even the darkest paint still had a little bit of refraction in it. Right? So any light would have refracted in there a teeny bit, probably recognizable on an instrument, but you probably couldn't see it, right? But the idea was true darkness, being separated from light, is not the same as day and night. And so this is a very important distinction as you're going through this and looking at how God presents the universe to us, right? So he takes the heavens and separates the day from the night. So now we have the first point where we can actually start saying, oh, maybe we now have actual days to talk about as we understand them, right? And he said, "Let them be for signs and for seasons." So these are not things to foretell your future or anything, right? But these are signs for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And that's light upon the earth even in the daylight and at night. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars, and God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. Okay. Continuing with 18, to rule over the day, over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. Now here, this is different though. Just remember, this is still not the true darkness that God started with, where he said, "Let there be light," and then there was light, and then he separated the light from the darkness. This is still dark for us, but it's not absolute darkness. Okay? And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, there was morning, the fourth day. Okay, so this is probably the first time we can really talk about there truly being a day, because now we have day and night, we have the sun to rule the day, we have the moon to rule the night, we have stars. So one question is, what were the stars, right? And, well, there's a great thing we can do here. I like, once again, this is Logos. This is part of their new desktop system, their study assistant, which is their version of AI built into it. So let's just ask that question. What did the early Second Temple, or early, helps if I spell properly, doesn't it? Early Hebrews believe the stars were? So remember, we understand what they are now, in terms of being little suns out in the far, far distance, right? We understand that part of astronomy, right? But what did they feel like? What did they feel it was in their context? And this can be an important thing to understand, because we're talking about Genesis being given to these early Hebrews that have just left Egypt. And they spent 400 years as stars, I was reading stars, 400 years as slaves in Egypt. And so this is the people that Moses is writing this to, right? So the early Hebrew understanding of stars operated within a distinctive theological framework that set them apart from their neighbors. Okay, so this is important now, right? Like surrounding Near Eastern peoples, ancient Hebrews regarded the stars as living, intelligent beings. Yet they rejected the religious practices common in neighboring cultures. While other nations venerated stars as divine entities, Israel received explicit prohibition against such worship, with severe penalties imposed for celestial worship, which would be, right, astrology, right? Rather than viewing stars as autonomous powers, Hebrew theology emphasized their subordination to the God of Israel. The Hebrew Bible consistently portrays Yahweh as the creator who numbered and named the stars, with those heavenly bodies responding immediately to divine commands. Stars possessed agency. They could sing and rejoice, and even participate in earthly conflicts. Importantly, the depiction of stars as living creatures in biblical texts appears to reflect genuine belief rather than mere poetic metaphor. It was the worldview at the time, right? The Hebrews also employed stars symbolically within their religious imagination. Stars functioned as symbols for angels, with Job 38:7, right? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Sons of God, in Hebrew, B'nai Elohim, only means spiritual beings, okay? So angels, for lack of an easier term for us. Identifying the morning stars with the sons of God. Additionally, the stars served as symbols for prominent figures, with the star out of Jacob designating King David or the Messiah, right? This all goes back here, once again, to the Bible, where God said he put them over there. He put the sun and the moon to rule the day and over the night, right? And they were set to be signs, right? Okay? They were not things that necessarily, controlled our lifestyle, right? So this was very important consideration. Okay, so let's go back real quick. Let's finish this up. The theological perspective represented a deliberate rejection of surrounding cosmologies. The Hebrew God revealed to his people that stars were merely creations subject to divine will. Fundamentally, reframing celestial bodies from objects of worship into witnesses to God's power and majesty, right? That's why they were witnesses. The consistent emphasis on divine control and the prohibition against star worship shaped how Hebrews understood their place within a cosmos ordered by the covenant God. And that's why it's very important to understand what is symbolic in Genesis, but also what is God's will and what is he presenting to people, right? So we do have the sun, we do have the moon, we do have the stars, right? But they're not running our lives. They are signs for the seasons, right? For us, to help us run our lives. They are placed there by God, they're numbered by God, they're named by God, right? They have significance, but they are not things that we worship. And that's going to be a big difference here. Okay. There is a little note I have on here. And when you start talking about reading Torah portions anew, and the sages teach that God's creations are not just for us to use and enjoy as we make our way through the world, they are also here to teach and guide us. Each of God's creations has a message and a teaching, right? So what's the teachings of the sun and the moon? And here we're going into a little bit of some Jewish thought here, but this is older Jewish thought, right? This dates back hundreds and thousands of years. Tradition teaches that when God first created the sun and moon, the two luminaries were equally as bright. This made the moon very upset. The moon went to God and said, "Can two kings share one crown? Who will rule the sky, me or the sun?" As a result, God diminished the moon. She became less bright and would only shine at night. From this allegory, and this is an allegory, the sages teach, he who seeks fame will lose his name. As a result of the moon wanting to be greater than the sun, she became less brilliant than she had already been. So that makes some sense, and that's actually very, very good teaching. They're not implying anything greater than that, right? However, the story doesn't end there. Once the moon became less bright, the stars around her became visible. Had she been as brilliant as the sun, those stars could never shine. As a result, the moon became the queen of the sky, and the stars around her became her subjects. From this, we can learn that sometimes when we are less, we become more. And when we let others shine, we become more brilliant than ourselves. Okay, that's actually a very good life lesson, right? And this fits right in with the concept that the sun and the moon and the stars were placed there to be guides to us, to show us the seasons, and for us to learn from. And one of the things we can learn, as the sages came up with this story, and this is definitely an allegory, this is definitely very much a metaphor, but it fits, right? That, and if you're a Christian, it fits right into the teachings of Jesus, where he said, he who wants to be most in the kingdom needs to be last, right? He needs to serve, okay? And so this fits right in with ancient Jewish teaching. This fits right in with Christ and his teachings that wanting to be more brilliant than the sun is not necessarily the best thing in the world, okay? So we finished up with a great lesson here. The day here we actually have on day 4 sun and the moon, so we now have this ability to potentially think about a 24-hour time frame. I'm not that convinced that we have to worry too much about it being a 24-hour period, because we're still within the confines of the entire chapter 1, right, of Genesis. The entire creation story is a poem, so we should read it as a poem. Okay, and that can be very important. So we want to do that. Now, the last thing I want to get into here is there are people who constantly tell me, Mark, you're being symbolic here when this stuff is obviously narrative because they don't see the poetry in it, and we should take it as literal. I'm going, well, okay, it's hard to take some of this stuff literal, right? God creates plants and then the sun and the moon. Plants kind of need the sun and the moon, the sun, right, to grow. So this is not a science textbook. This is God showing us the order that He's bringing to our world and why we should do that. Okay, so that's very important for us to understand. So it's quite obvious that this is, if you can't see the poetry in here, because you're not familiar with looking for the chiasms and the parallelisms in there, just understand that this is very much poetic. Most, I will make the statement, most of the Old Testament is written in poetic form because that's just the easier way to memorize stuff if you can't write it down continually and have a written book with you, right? If you're going to have to memorize it orally, being in a poetry form is an easier way to memorize things. So just keep putting yourself back. How would you have memorized this? How would you have heard this 4,000 years ago? You can't truly be there, obviously, but you can put yourself back in there and give yourself a lot of room. Now, the problem with being too literal, when I was a kid growing up, comic books were still very much a big thing. And I remember, all of the DC and Marvel comic books and stuff, and we would read them, pass them around and stuff. But I liked comic books. I wasn't too enamored with the superheroes that could do magical things, but they were there. And then when the Marvel universe started coming out in terms of as a movie studio, right, and they started producing the comic books, especially in the early years when the movies were much closer to the comic books, I enjoyed them. You take them for their entertainment. And one of the early movies I really enjoyed because it was funny was Guardians of the Galaxy. So if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe take some time and watch it. It's enjoyable. It's not anything you're going to really learn from. It's an enjoyable experience. And once in a while having some entertainment is good. But there's a character in the Guardians of the Galaxy, Drax the Destroyer. And the question I'm going to ask is, how many people have a Drax the Destroyer in their Bible study group, right? And I have. My mentor, Dr. Michael Heiser, was one of my chief mentors here. He had this comment he made. He said, if you have a Drax the Destroyer in your Bible study, it makes it really hard to try and find some of the answers in the Bible because Drax the Destroyer does not understand metaphor. They talk about the fact that you can't use metaphor with Drax. And the quote was, metaphors go over his head. And Drax says, nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too quick. I catch them. It's like, he doesn't even get the fact that they're using a metaphor to make fun of him, right? And people who are too literal are like Drax the Destroyer. They don't see the beauty sometimes in what's in front of them. But there is a problem. If you get too much into thinking everything is a metaphor, everything is symbolic, well, then you can pretty much make the Bible say anything you want it to say. So this is where I'm going to tell you, yes, this first part of Genesis, the creation story, I'm telling you, is a poem. We need to read it with some theological symbolism in mind. But let's not get too deep into that symbolic world. And let's balance it against some level of literalism so that we don't get lost in things that we can turn into anything we want them to be. Because you get too symbolic, you can make the Bible read like it means anything. Okay? So we're just trying to, have that balance. And that's what I'm really about. Let's have some balance in everything we're doing. So hope you like that. If you have questions, leave me comments. Let me know what you want. If you have some ideas for things you want me to start looking into covering for you, put it in the comments for me, okay? If you haven't done so, think about liking and subscribing to the channel. Also, share this with a friend who might enjoy it and might get something from it as well. It helps us out, and I appreciate that work. If you like what you're seeing me do with Logos Bible Study software, I'll put a link in there where you get a discount. So if you're going to use it, you might as well get a discount, right? And so that's very good. So you can do that and just have a great and wonderful day and be blessed. Thank you very much.